Hey, happy Friday morning to you, everyone. Welcome to a very special Friday edition of Morning Musings. And I guess I'll call this Responding to the Critics. I have been asked by several people if I would address and review Dr. Kenneth Gentry's book, Have We Missed the Second Coming? Now, I'm going to be spending a little bit of time on this book refuting Dr. Gentry's claims. And let me say this right up front, okay? I have respected Dr. Gentry for a good long while. So the comments that I'm going to offer in this series are certainly not intended to be personal attacks against him. He and I have been on the same dais before. We communicate with one another. I've always found him to be friendly and courteous, and I appreciate that. I will, however, speak very candidly, as he writes very candidly in his comments in this book. But again, it's not absolutely not personal. Now, Dr. Gentry tells us in this book, and again, the name of it is Have We Missed the Second Coming? I want you to listen very carefully to what Dr. Gentry says, page 1 of the preface. He says, there are too many variations and too much infighting in the movement, that is the Preterist movement, to provide a full critique in a book of this size. Wherever you have 5 Hyper-Preterists. Now notice that term. Dr. Gentry begins at the very first of his book in an attempt to poison the well. I mean, after all, if something is hyper, then it's radical, right? And if it's radical, it's wrong. So he begins at the very first in an attempt to poison the well of the mind of those who are going to read this book. Well, we continue. Wherever you have 5 Hyper-Preterists, you may have 7 or 8 different views. For occasionally, a Hyper-Preterist will not even agree with himself, unquote. I got to tell you, I find this comment absolutely amazing. On the one hand, it's almost funny. On the other hand, it's very sad. And here's what I mean. Dr. Gentry is, of course, a Reformed writer. Does Dr. Gentry want actually to argue, to suggest that the Reformed movement does not have, let me see, what was his term? Many variations and intricate subtleties within it? Anybody remotely familiar with the Reformed movement knows of all the different variations and the various subtleties in the Reformed movement. To suggest that it is a united, singular doctrine without variation, totally unified, is absolutely a ludicrous idea. Now watch this. Wherever you have 5 Hyper-Preterists, you may have 7 or 8 different views. Now, this is absolutely remarkable. Just this week, in fact, just this morning, I was reading on Facebook a discussion. The discussion was started by a former preterist in an attempt to negate me. All right? It's a discussion about the body of Christ. I'm being condemned as heretic, just like Dr. Gentry does. And what is amazing, on this board, as they attack Don Preston and coveted eschatology, is you got all these different people condemning Preston, and yet while they condemn me, you read all of these different views. They do not even agree among themselves as they attack me. Oh, they have the singular, united view that Preston is wrong, but their views that they're sharing contradict each other. Unity? Hardly. Notice then Dr. Hester's statement, occasionally a Hyper-Preterist will not even agree with himself. Wow. That statement is incredible. You know, in my book, The Resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, I document from Dr. Kenneth Gentry's own writings, in which he at one time applied Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 to the so-called end of time and the end of human history. Whatever goes in the dust, i.e. a human physical body, is what must come out. And to teach otherwise is heresy. Oh, but wait! Guess what? Dr. Kenneth Gentry now teaches that Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, as full preterists have been saying all along, that Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 referred to the resurrection of the Old Covenant body of Israel, the transformation of that Old Covenant body into the spiritual body of Christ, and it occurred, would you like to guess when? That's right, in AD 70. So here is Dr. Kenneth Gentry condemning the Preterist movement by saying, you know, occasionally you're going to find Hyper-Preterist that doesn't even agree with himself. Dr. Gentry, with all due respect, my friend, I suggest you look in the mirror. I suggest you look in the theological mirror at all of the variations and the differences within the Reformed community and tell us, is there a united front there? No, there is not. I suggest you look in the personal mirror and you say, well, I once believed this, but now I don't believe that anymore. I believe this. And oh, by the way, what I believe now agrees with the full preterist view. This is a radical change, ladies and gentlemen. Did he inform his readers? Now, here's what I once believed, but I don't believe that anymore. I now believe what the full preterists teach about it. No, he didn't tell anyone of that radical change. By the way, that's not the only passage he's changed on. It is, therefore, more than disingenuous for Dr. Kenneth Gentry to begin his, quote, expose, unquote, my term, of preterism by attempting to poison the well by giving you, the reader, the impression that because there are differences within the preterist movement, my goodness, that must mean there's something wrong. And by telling you some preterists don't even agree with themselves because, Dr. Gentry, you don't even agree with yourself. Okay, so for the next several weeks, I'm going to be examining Dr. Gentry's book, Have We Missed the Second Coming? And by the way, if you want full documentation of Dr. Kenneth Gentry's changes, his self-contradictions, for instance, in regard to the resurrection, you need to get a copy of my book, The Resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. You'll be absolutely amazed at Dr. Kenneth Gentry's own self-contradictions. This is going to be an enjoyable exercise. It'll be troublesome in some ways as you see Dr. Kenneth Gentry's misrepresentations of the preterist view. You will be amazed at his lack of solid logic, his failure of hermeneutic, his self-contradictory exegetical exercises. But you don't want to miss the series, okay? So for the next few weeks, be watching as we respond to the critics here on Morning Musings.